Hi there to you, I hope I find you well. I'm Jennifer Kirk, welcoming you back to the channel up here in the loft on Wear Yard. And today we've got the review of a new product that's come out from Accurascale, and these are the PTA Iron Ore Tippler Wagons. I'm really excited to be able to show you these, and Accurascale have very kindly sent over a pack of these. So without further ado, and in association with the channel sponsor Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories, let's go and take a close look at this new wagon to hit the market. This is the product that Accurascale have very kindly sent over. I've taken it out of its outer plastic protective sleeve because it was actually reflecting off the lighting that we're using here quite badly, made it difficult to see on camera. But what I really love about this, even before we get into it and have a look at the wagons, is the amount of thought that's gone into the presentation box. It comes almost like an A4 size box file with the line drawings on the side, and I'm just going to show you the catalogue number there as well. So it's ACC 2100-BSC, the inner plus outer, livery BSC grey orange, and it even gives you the wagon numbers. And I believe that Accurascale have modelled these formations on those that they can identify from photographic records, so that the train itself will match photographs that are out there, so you can make up some very prototypical train formations. When these were in use for the steel traffic, the iron ore traffic, they actually in some instances formed the heaviest trains to ever run on Britain's railways. Iron ore is incredibly dense, so these were massively well engineered wagons, but it wasn't uncommon to see rakes of these wagons being hauled by triple-headed Class 37s and later on double-headed Class 56s. That's a lot of horsepower to move what were some incredibly heavy trains, and it does mean that these will be the ideal companion to go with the forthcoming release of the Accurascale Class 37s. I really do love the presentation of the packaging. I know that, you know, at the end of the day we're not buying models for the boxes, but part of the package that you get, it oozes quality, and I just love that, the kind of the pride that you can see that Accurascale have in their product to be able to show it off in this way. If we open up this kind of box file, we have the wagons, 5 of them in the blister packaging here, and I'm just going to lift these out, and it's the same sort of packaging that we saw on some of the other Accurascale wagons. I'm just going to move that to one side. And what we actually get in the bottom here as well, we get a little bit of detail about the history of the wagons. So, turn of the 1970s, British Steel found itself with a need for new high-capacity wagons to convey iron ore to its plants. So, the first batch built by British Rail Engineering Limited at Shildon Works, 1972. And it says the design code PT001, and then the subsequent batches were built by British Steel's own Redpath Dorman Long subsidiary in Middlesbrough between 72 and 78. And so if we just double check actually with the catalogue number that we've got here, this is from the later batches. So these wagons were the Dorman Long build. But it does say on here, rotated, they're designed to be rotated 160 degrees. And the way that this worked, and actually this was something that answered, I suppose, not really so much a question, but explained the livery. And you'll see here that we've got the orange stripe at one end of the wagons, apart from on one wagon. I did wonder about this, but that's actually denoting where the rotating coupling is. Now, the wagons had a rotating coupling at one end and a fixed coupling at the other, and this meant that they could be rotated without being uncoupled from the train, and the orange stripe made it much easier to work out how to marshal the train together so that you didn't try and rotate a wagon against a fixed coupling. So it's actually very important. We've got the wagons assembled on the track, and they do look really, really good. Their stance is perfect. I've got them with what's actually a Bachmann 37, and you can see the correct way to line them up so that you've always got orange to grey, never grey to grey or orange to orange, and that's the correct way to form up the rake. On the back here as well, we've got the exploded diagram, and for anybody who wonders why model trains cost what they do, just look at that. You imagine making all of those parts, but not just making them, but then assembling them, and being able to do that, paint and finish it for anything less than what they do retail for. I defy you to be able to do that. We've also got a list of spare parts. You shouldn't really need any of the spare parts, but they are there, and it tells you how many you need. You could actually build a wagon out of spare parts. We've also got in here some information about one of the wagons in this rake actually has a tail lamp, and it is a working tail lamp. Now, I've seen modelers who have added their own working tail lamps, and to great effect, but this, I believe, is the first time that I have seen a ready-to-run wagon come with a working tail lamp as standard. And what this is showing you is how to fit the battery and how to control it. There's a switch underneath to make it all work. Now, I'm going to be showing you fitting that and showing it working later on. So we've got an Energizer lithium battery. This is the CR2012 type. You can buy these in, I think most supermarkets do sell them, and they're incredibly thin. They're very much like, I think these are CMOS type batteries for computers is generally what they would be used for. But because they're so thin, they can actually hide that underneath the floor of the wagon, so it's not obtrusive at all, and the switch just means you can turn it on and off, so it's not on all the time. We've also on the back got, I think that's just a duplicate of what we saw on the other piece of information, and then we also get 2 sets of additional brake hoses and the standard in-standard type coupling, which you would fit on the outer ends of the rake of 5. So we've got a set of those, enough to do the full rake. Now you might be wondering what couplings this is using. I'm just going to open this up. If I take out one of these wagons, and they come with actually, do keep this polystyrene, because I'm looking at that. These polystyrene blocks are perfect for scenic work, so nothing gets wasted here. Thank you very much, Accurascale. Just what I need for a project build I've got planned. But on the wagons themselves, just taking this is one of the end wagons as an example. We've got these Buckeye Knuckle type couplings. They remind me an awful lot of the ones that are used on US outline stock, and they're fully functional, lovely little couplings, and as per the prototype. So the rake will couple together with these inside the rake, and then on the ends of the rake in NEM pockets, and these are actually sprung loaded and self-centering. We have from the factory slimline tension lock couplings, but of course, because they're in a NEM pocket, you can replace them for KDs if you want, or indeed anything else. And I'm going to get all of these out of the box now and line them up. Those knuckle couplers between each wagon actually have a really nice positive grip with each other. They just clip together, and they're not actually difficult to remove either. You just sort of lift them up and they part company. You don't end up with a string of sausages. But certainly my first impression, this is the first time I've got it out of the box, is that there is actually a really great weight to these. It's not obvious necessarily where the weight is, but you can see they have the characteristic quite strong, thick construction sides of the original. And of course, as I said before, iron ore is incredibly dense. So the wagons have to be massively over-engineered to be able to withstand the punishment of carrying those kinds of loads. So I'm just looking on there at the tare weight. So we're looking at a wagon that weighs 24.4 tons and can carry in total 76 tons. Well, it will weigh 76 tons with its load. So you can work out how much iron ore that is carrying. We've also got these really well engineered bogies as well. Again, because that suspension is having to carry all that weight, everything has to be massively engineered. And we can see as well the gussets on the underside of the wagon really, really nicely engineered, and because these are all separate components assembled, we saw that exploded diagram of all the parts, we actually get a very prototypically accurate rendition of the chassis. I love all this brake detail as well. It feels like it's a kind of a springy plastic, I think, but certainly look at all of the separate colour finishing on the yellow and the red, all of those cylinders in there. That is really nicely done, prototypically accurate. I'm just loving what I'm seeing with this. The bogies as well, if we look at that as well, there's extra space at the ends. I'm just looking how they fit together, and it does mean that if you want to convert these to P4 or EM, it does look like there is additional space there to be able to pull the axles out to make that possible. It's also nice to see that because we've got these kind of knuckle couplings, the pipework between the wagons comes pre-fitted. Though on the ends, that's what the extra packets were for in the box, because if you're using the slimline tension lock coupling, they're going to potentially foul that, which is why they're there for a user-fitted item. The buffers are all sprung loaded on the wagon, and the wagon actually has only buffers on the outer ends because it doesn't actually need them on the inner faces. So correctly modelled with the just no buffers whatsoever on the end, because those knuckle couplings hold the wagons at a fixed distance. They never buffer up, so there's no need for buffers. We've also got separately applied ladders on the side, and I like these rib details as well, which very, very subtly, if you hold it there, you can see that the wagon is not slab-sided, it's not on the vertical, but it's actually very, very slightly trapezoidal shaped. So you can see that these gussets, they stick out further at the bottom than they do at the top, because the wagon sides are actually angled slightly outwards. So there's some immense attention to detail. Those ribs do look the business, don't they? And I just love the look on these wagons. Strong, businesslike, and prototypically accurate. There is a lot going on here as well. We've got all of the tops plates as well there, and extra detail all printed on and all perfectly legible under close magnification. Every single bit that should be there is there, and it's something that we've seen in all the other wagons from Accurascale, that the attention to detail, the closer you look, the more that there is going on. They do just keep on giving. Effectively, they just are an accurate representation of the full-size prototypes. And having talked with Accurascale, also talked with a few other manufacturers as well, there is an element of just sending off the CAD files and the data files for these with all the information that the full-sized one has, and just seeing what happens. And it's testament to the factories in China that this detail is coming back totally legible and perfect. Right, I'm going to put that to one side, and let's get the other wagons out as well. All of these wagons are really, really nice. Again, every single one has that same heavy weight. And actually, I just noticed, this is the one that goes at the other end of the rake. So we've got the knuckle style coupling there and the tension lock there, but there is the tail lamp. And just to look at it, you wouldn't realise actually that that is fully functional. And this is going to be the wagon that we're going to be fitting that battery to in a bit. But I'm really, really impressed by that. It's a feature that, as I said to you before, I've seen a lot of modelers add them in themselves, but to see it coming as standard in a wagon really is quite interesting. So let's put that to one side. Let's keep getting the rest of these wagons out. Again, keeping all of this polystyrene, it's actually great for doing things like landscape and scenery. Although it does do a great job of protecting these wagons in transit. So just going to put the packaging to one side. And just picking this one, last one out as an example. This is one of the inner wagons, so you can see that there's no buffers on either end. and we've got those knuckle couplings ready fitted, and all of the brake pipes are in place. As far as the rest of the wagon is concerned, they do seem to be pretty much standard with the end wagons. So effectively we've got inner wagons and outer wagons. I know that Accurascale do sell extra packs of the inner wagons so you can lengthen your rake. So there's really plenty of options to expand your wagon fleet as and when you wish to. So we've got the two end wagons. I'm just going to put them both there, and of course that end wagon there has the all over grey livery. The rest of these wagons all have the orange end. As I said before, that's to designate the end for the purpose of shunting these wagons that had the swivelling coupling to allow these wagons to be tippled. So when you would see them all lined up in a rake, you would be looking at, let's just see there, so they would go like that and like that. You would not have grey to grey or orange to orange in a rake, and that's how they would get marshalled. But all of the rest of these wagons really, really nicely done. Again, we've got the detail differences between the different running numbers of the wagons. So some of these ever so slight differences in where bits and pieces are printed on them, and they do actually as well look like the perfect candidate for some heavy duty weathering. You can imagine that they're being subjected to some really, really heavy weights being thumped in and out of these, some rough handling. And then add to that, the iron ore itself is going to give a lot of rust staining, even if it's not going to rust the wagons out themselves. So a lot of scope here for weathering, and certainly that is something that I may consider for a future project. But everything about these is really nicely done. And actually what's interesting as well is that these knuckle couplings between the wagons fit back to these kind of NEM style pockets as well. So should you need to change these, they are again very, very accessible items to let you do that. The bogies, I'm looking there, I think they're clipped in, but they are really, really quite firm. There's a great deal of lateral movement in each direction to allow these to flex over slightly uneven track. And certainly I've got every faith that their track holding abilities is going to be second to none. Now what I want to do now is go to the wagon that we're going to fit the tail light to. So let me just try and find, which one was it? There it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to retrieve the instructions over here. It's always nice to have full instructions as to where the detail goes. So let's have a look. We need to remove the floor of the wagon by pushing a precision screwdriver or similar implement through the underframe slots. And it's looking at, it's showing it going down through the bogies. So let's just take a look at that. And I can just about make out the slots in there. And I think this is just a push fit. I don't think that there is anything that, I'm just having a look actually. I think you can take the floor out in all the wagons by this method, but we're going to stick with this. So I've got my trusty jeweler's screwdriver, I think that's what it meant, and let's just try and angle this light a little bit just to help me out. And let's just look in there, and it's just a push fit, and you can feel they're in snug, but not so snug as to require excessive force to get these out. And you can actually see quite well what we're looking for. I'm guessing that when I get that last one in, it's going to just drop out, I'm guessing. I've not actually tried doing this before, so this is as new for me as it is for you guys. it is quite a tight fit, and there we have it. So as you can see here, once we get inside the wagon, you can see the steel weight, I think that is in there, which is providing all of that adhesion for the wagon. Huge amount of adhesion. And then we've got the plastic floor of the wagon with those 4 lugs there. So it's much easier to work out what it is you're needing to do to get this in and out when you can actually see the inner construction. And let's go to that battery now. I'm just checking as well, if we look on here, so we want the writing side up on the battery, and it just fits between those contacts, which I can see down there in the wagon. And these are actually tremendously thin. I think these are thinner than CMOS batteries. They're a 3-volt battery, but incredibly, incredibly thin. Very difficult with the camera to just focus on that. But now what the instructions are saying is we've got to get that between those contacts, and it's actually quite an easy fit, and that top sprung contact does hold it down. And before I put the floor back in, I'm going to look now for the switch, and you can just see just down in there is a very, very tiny switch, and I'm hoping that let's just very, very carefully flick the switch over. All of these have been tested at the factory, but one thing that may be something that's affected these is that these brass contacts have been pushed down flat, and you need a good contact with the battery. So what I've done is I've actually used my tweezers, and you can see there I've put a twist on the end of that bottom one, curled it up so it's not recessed into the floor. I've also put another downward twist onto this as well, and you can see there they're actually touching each other. And hopefully what that means is now when we insert the battery the correct way up, let's just try and get that in there, I can feel that it's really gripping that battery. And it is just something that Accurascale told me that they are aware that sometimes you might have to bend these contacts. Dead easy to do, like I said, with a pair of tweezers. So hopefully, let's see where we are. So I'm going to put the floor back in because this just helps to push that battery contact together. So you can actually see at the sides, just push and push. It's an interference fit, so just feel it go into place. And then let's see if we get contact now with the tail lamp. So I'm just going to get in there and flick it to the on position, and you can see that tail lamp is flashing, and for some reason it doesn't get picked up on this camera very, very clearly, but in actual life when you look at it with your naked eye, believe me, it is nice and noticeable. So really nice touch. And again, when you're done, all you have to do is just make sure you get down in there and flick it off, and that just saves the battery life. So really pleased with that, and obviously glad that Accurascale was just able to give me a couple of pointers there. And again, that's something, if you buy these and you put your battery in and it doesn't start flashing immediately, do try bending those contacts. Just make sure you've got a good tight grip on that battery with the contacts. And as you saw there, springs into life, despite the fact that I was worried there for a moment, but not to fear, one of those things. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get these on the layout. I found a class 37, and I'm going to put this rake of 5 on the layout behind that, and I'm going to test their running qualities. I'm going to start running these now and see just how well they go. So I managed to get the locomotive going the wrong way there. I'm going to give that a little bit of juice. And we'll see just how they cope through the various bits of track work up here on Weir Yard. So obviously straight track, absolutely fine. I'm not seeing any real wobbles, anything like that, as they go over my very uneven track. Despite what people think, my track laying skills are not absolutely perfect, so there are a great deal of twists and kinks knocking about on this layout. One of the other things that I've also got going on this layout are things like double slips. There's one coming up there now, so we'll just see how well they cope going through that track work. Double slips and also three-way points are often the Achilles heel of any wagon. They really do show up where back-to-backs are not right, or any other minor imperfections, but they've gone through without even a wobble. It's really nice to see. And I can see that really there's just no issue whatsoever with their running characteristics. I've been really impressed with what I've seen with these PTA wagons from Accurascale. There is a lot of attention to detail, and I particularly like what you see in the underframe. This pipework is really exquisite, colour-coded where it should be. It looks good enough to be real. On the inner sides of the wagon as well, we've got all of the pipework ready fitted from the factory, so you don't have to bother with anything other than making a decision on whether you add the extra pipes at the end of each rake. What comes in the box is a full rake of 5 wagons, so you could run them as is. But Accurascale do also sell the inner wagons, which allows you to expand this rake prototypically, and it is a good way of slowly building up your fleet. They do them in a number of different liveries that match the wagons throughout their operational lifespan. I found that all of the actual printing on the wagons is legible. I couldn't really find anything to fault with these wagons, except perhaps that these could be improved would be with an offering of a factory faded and weathered livery. They just seem too clean, and I think that probably unless you saw them within a few days of them leaving the works where they were built, they would have very quickly started to look quite dirty. The iron ore that they carried would have left a rust wash all over them very, very quickly. And the photographs that I have seen of them do show them in quite a battered, faded livery. But really, that's splitting hairs, and as I always say, I score things starting out at 100% and only take off marks for things that are wrong. I think that this is the most sincere and fairest way of scoring items, and in this day and age we are somewhat spoiled because the quality of these is far and above what most people could ever manage to do for a similar price in kit built. So I feel that actually these are a really great set of models. First up is finish, and really there's not really anything of note to fault, and I know I'm going to get roasted over my score for these, but really if I can't find a fault, then why would I be taking anything off the score? The finish has been perfect. Nothing has come apart, nothing has come loose in the handling. Even some of those brake pipes that are of scale thickness have stood up well to handling and running these wagons. And between you and me, I accidentally dropped one of these wagons and it came out completely unscathed. So I've been really impressed with the build quality, and that gives it a 10 out of 10. The next up is functionality. They ran really, really well. They followed that Class 37 through all manner of twists and turns in the point work. They got through points and also double slips, which can quite often derail wagons that have any kind of issue with wheel back-to-backs. So really, there wasn't anything to fault here as well. And I feel like I'm looking for a fault just to justify taking something off, but I can't find anything, so it gets another 10 out of 10. The next category is ease of use, and certainly this for me covers fitting that battery for the working tail light. I love the idea of having a working tail light on the last wagon in the rake. It's adding that little extra something. And by having it as a separate circuit running off a small discrete 3-volt battery, it negates any need to mess about with potentially expensive DCC. So I really like that aspect. But one thing that could quite easily have foxed me is that the brass terminals, as they come from the factory, needed bending up a little bit just to make sure that there was a good solid contact with the battery. And I actually had to get in touch with Accurascale just to make sure what I was doing was right and to clarify that there wasn't a fault with the wagon. There wasn't a fault with the wagon, but just be aware that you may have to bend those contacts. So for ease of use, I'm going to give this a 9.1 out of 10. When it comes to aesthetics, these wagons do really capture the look of the prototypes. That's one of the watchwords for Accurascale's models. They're just perfect recreations in miniature of the full-size models, and it's why I'm so looking forward to some of their other models that have been announced, such as the Class 37s, that will be an excellent pairing with these wagons. I've got every faith, based on all of the previous Accurascale wagons that I've reviewed, that these are accurate to the originals, and comparing these with photographs that I find on the net, I cannot find any areas where I can point to something and say they got that wrong, because quite frankly they didn't. The attention to detail really is superb. For me, the only thing that could have made the aesthetics of these wagons better would be weathering, factory applied weathering. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, and for a lot of people, they kind of like to start out with a completely clean X-Works wagon so that they can do their own weathering themselves to whatever standards that they are looking for. But for me, and I think for an awful lot of users, it would be nice to see these offered in a factory weathered option. So I'm going to give this a 9.9 out of 10. And finally, we come to value for money. Now, I know a lot of people might balk at the prices that we're starting to get up to for wagons and locomotives. And actually, this 5-pack set of wagons is coming pretty much in at the price that you might expect to pay for a single locomotive. But look at what you get for that money. The detail on these is exquisite. All of that brake detail on the underside, all the separately applied parts that go into making up the chassis of what could quite easily have been a mundane one-piece moulding wagon. Accurascale didn't choose to go down that route, and I really like the fact that they have really pulled out the stops for something that would otherwise just be a pretty mundane wagon. And I suppose you could argue that that is the USP, the unique selling point of Accurascale, that they make the mundane really interesting. And I like that very much. These aren't wagons that I would have particularly gone for myself if it wasn't for the fact that they were being made by Accurascale and to this standard. Yes, they are expensive, but you divide that price by 5 and they're getting down to the kind of price that you might expect from other manufacturers. And look at that exploded diagram that comes in the paperwork with these. It's not a one-piece moulding. There is a lot that has gone into this wagon to make them look just like the prototype. So I'm going to give these an 8.9 out of 10. And that gives a final score of an incredibly respectable 47.9 out of 50. Can I recommend these wagons? Yes, I certainly can. I'm really pleased with these. It's another great wagon from this manufacturer. Well, I hope you found that video informative. I really enjoyed showing you these wagons in detail. You can check them out at the affiliate link down below, which takes you to Rails of Sheffield, where you can pick up your own version in the same livery that we've shown you today, or indeed any of the other liveries that are available. You can also head on over to Patreon and check us out there if you want to support the channel and help us to continue to make the videos that you want to see. But until next time, this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying you take great care of yourself, happy modelling, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, and an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky 107, George Botterini, Andy Finch, Chris Moss, Robert Sears, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grant Line Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, and Mo Henry. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.